All right. Sounds good. It's hard to go really after Nabu Mesab. I'm not known to be a great speaker, but I think um, there's a lot of anxiety and fear right now. And I thought I would say a few things that might the solutions really, it's not me saying, but the solutions that are presented by Quran to ease those fears um, that we all have. So I'm gonna share my screen. I hope it works. Let's see. Right, here we go. Okay. Is it working?
Yes,
Can you guys see my screen? Okay. All right. So I was looking for some verses from the Holy Quran. So I came upon this. Actually, I was thinking that I will present like a set of verses from here and there, but really this about 10 or 11 verses in Surah Al-Baqarah just perfectly describe the situation that we find ourselves in, and what we have to do, and the fear and anxiety that all of us have, that I talked about. Some of us, we have already lost our jobs. Some, you may not have lost jobs, but you might have, your hours might have been cut back, or part of your income might have been reduced. Others, it might not have happened yet, but you might be thinking that, okay, probably, okay, my company, how long can they survive in this situation? Maybe they'll lay me off. I'll lose my job. What will happen? Maybe I will not get my bonus that I was expecting. My income will be reduced. So all these fears, and a lot of us are doing, you know, things to prepare for that. You might be saving money, putting it in the bank, cutting back on expenses. So those are all good things which everybody should be doing, because Allah Ta'ala tells us, even like, for example, when we talk about COVID, you do all the physical things that you need to do, staying away from people, washing your hands and all that. But then Huzur advises, ultimately, when it comes to, the real protection, that comes from Allah, and you rely on prayer. So similarly, in this situation, all that is good, cutting back expenses, saving money, all that is good. But what we have also seen some people are doing, and National Secretary Maal Sahib for Jamaat, Tala Chaudhry Sahib also sent an email that we have seen quite a few people cutting back on Chanda. And that's where I wanted to present these verses and see what kind of solutions that Allah has told us, and what assurances that He has given us regarding that. So I'll just go over verse by verse, and I'll highlight a few points from each of the verse. So this is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 262. So in the interest of time, I'll just focus on the translation. So the similitude of those who spend their wealth for the cause of Allah is like the similitude of a grain of corn, which grows 7 years, and each year 100 grains, and Allah multiplies it further, and Allah is bountiful and all-knowing. So I'll focus on this part, that Allah multiplies it further. So in this verse, Allah has promised us that if you spend your money in my way, He will multiply it manifold, and He is the one who is the bountiful. He's the one who's in this word wase, right? He can increase it. So you in the worldly sense, if you go to some investment advisor, you try to invest money, they all have these disclaimers saying, okay, all investments carries risk. You might lose your principal, all that. But this is investment advisor here who's giving a guarantee that he'll multiply your wealth, and there's no disclaimer, there's no if but anything like that, right? So that's Allah promising us in the Holy Quran that if we spend in His way, then He will multiply our wealth. So I'll move on to the next verse. And they spend their wealth for the cause of Allah, and then they follow not up with what they have spent with taunt or injury. For them is the reward with their Lord, and they shall have no fear, and they shall not grieve. So again, I'm going to focus on this part. They shall have no fear, and they shall not grieve. So again, as I said in the beginning, there's right now a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. But what is the solution? And the solution is given to us by Allah Ta'ala, that if you spend in His way, then you shall have no fear, and you shall not grieve. And in fact, we should have been spending, giving chanda and all those other charitable things before the crisis hit, because when the crisis hits, then everybody becomes scared and starts to remember Allah. But there's a hadith of Holy Prophet ﷺ that I also shared a few days ago, that spend in the way of Allah in good times, and Allah will remember you in the bad times, right? When the times are hard. So that was the time really, but to spend in the way of Allah. But still, Allah doesn't let any good deed go to waste. So even if you haven't spent it, you didn't spend it previously, or didn't spend it as much as you should have, now is still the time. So moving on, a kind word and forgiveness are better than charity followed by injury, and Allah is self-sufficient and forbearing. So in this verse, I'm going to focus on this word, self-sufficient, and then the word in Arabic, ghani, that, who is the real person or being who is the self-sufficient. We are all think ourselves that, okay, I'm going to save some money, I'll put some money in the bank, I'll cut back on expenses, and then somehow I'll get through this crisis. But Allah is telling us here that it is only Allah who is, in the real sense, is self-sufficient. You might do whatever you want to do. You might save a few $100 there, $1,000 there, and you might do your own thing. But really, the only person or the only being that is self-sufficient is Allah. He's the one who's ghani, and all your little schemes can be brought to nothing if he wants to. So USA, one of the richest countries, the mightiest power, its economy has been brought down to its knees by the tiniest of the creatures. And I don't know if you guys hear the press conference of President Trump every day, and the phrase that he uses the most often is, nobody could have ever thought that this could happen, right? But Allah, he has his ways. So he brought down the biggest economy, the mightiest superpower, by the very tiniest, like nothing is like smaller creature than that, right? A virus, it's barely alive, but it was able to bring down the biggest economy. So if you think that you have, USA is spending trillions of dollars now trying to get out of this, and are trying to save a few $100 here, $1,000 there, and think that you will be sufficient for yourself, then that's as I say, it's a fool's errand. Basically, Allah is the one who is the self-sufficient, and if you don't put your trust in Allah, then all your plans, everything can just go to waste. So I'm going to move on to the next verse. O you who believe, render not vain your alms by taunt and injury, and like him who spent his wealth to be seen of men, and he believes not in Allah in the last day. And his case is like the cast of a smooth rock covered with earth, on which heavy rain falls, leaving it bare and smooth and hard. They shall not secure aught of what they earn, and Allah guides not the disbelieving people. So again, continuing on the same theme, that trust in Allah. I'm going to focus on this part. And he believes not in Allah. So we all say that we believe in Allah, but do we really put it to practice? Do we believe his words? In the Holy Quran, he has promised that he will, if you spend in his cause, then you will not be at a loss. He will return that money many times over. But at the same time, when we get into this financial distress, or we are worried about money, then we say, okay, we're going to try to save some money, cut back on chanda, and somehow when we are out of this crisis, then we'll give it to Allah. But really, what you are showing from your action is that you do not believe in Allah. Because if you had believed in Allah, then you would have spent that money as Allah demands you to. So that's the part I want to focus on this verse. Moving on, next verse. And the case of those who spend their wealth to seek the pleasure of Allah and to strengthen their souls is like the case of a garden on the elevated ground. Heavy rains falls on it, so that it brings forth its fruit twofold. And if heavy rain does not fall on it, the light rain suffices, and Allah sees what you do. Okay, let's focus on this part. Sometimes Allah literally multiplies our money. We get many times. There's Huzur, if you listen to his speeches, describe all these, incidents that people write to him about from all over the world, where somebody gives some chanda and gets much more in return. But sometimes, you don't really see much more in your bank account. Your bank account might be the same or might even reduce, but you're much more content even with less. So Allah has ways of providing for you from other means, which might not be physical money, but He has a way of providing, and that even that small amount, as Allah says, it will suffice for you. And the last part, that Allah sees what you do. So that's also very important. You might want to try, to be clever, as some people try to be, and say, okay, my Nazim Maal is asking me, or my secretary finance is asking me about chanda, I'll just give half of what I owe or give a smaller amount. But Allah is really saying, He sees what you do. He is the Razak. He's the one who provides for everything. So He sees what you do. So you might have your own plans. You might try to be clever, but Allah is the one who sees what you do. Moving on. Uh, does any of you desire that there should be for him a garden of palm trees and vines with streams flowing beneath it, and with all kinds of fruit from him therein? And when the old age has stricken him, and he has a weak offspring, and then a fiery whirlwind should smite it, and it be all burnt. Thus does Allah make his signs clear to you, you may ponder. So again, same thing. You might have your own plans, your schemes of saving money, and trying to avoid paying chanda, but Allah has His own plans, and He gives a simile of this garden that somebody has planted, and he's putting his trust in that garden, but ultimately, at old age, it gets all burnt to ground, and that's what For example, President Trump, his big thing was that he has the best economy, and he was basing his election on that good economy. But within few weeks, all the plans, everything, Allah eliminated all that with the virus, right? So if Allah can do that to the U.S., to much bigger powers than you, then He can do that to you. So again, putting the trust in Allah, that's the real thing. So then next verse, O you who believe, spend the good things that you have earned and what we produce from you from the earth, and seek not what is bad to spend out of it. And when you would not take it for yourself, except that you connive at it. And Allah knows, and know that Allah is self-sufficient and praiseworthy. So I'm gonna focus on spending the good things and not spending the bad things, right? So what is spending good? In another place in Holy Quran, Allah says that never shall you attain righteousness unless you spend out of what you love, right? So when you eat some food and there's some leftover, and you throw it away, or you give it to someone, or you wear clothes, and when they're all done, you try to donate it. That's what is leftover. That's not what's good. So when a lot of people, what they do is all year they're not going to give any chanda. People keep reminding them they won't give any chanda, but come September, October, for Kudam chanda, then they will pay it, right? So that doesn't really show what you're spending out of what you love, right? Because all year you loved that money and you held on to it, and then at the end, just before the deadline, you paid it. So if you were willing to spend it, and spend it now when you're in tough financial times, and you might want to hoard that money at this time, but when you spend it, then you really show that you don't love the money, you love Allah. So don't treat Allah like leftovers, right? Don't give him the leftovers. Give him the good thing. As Allah says, spend of the good things. So spend it now, and don't say, okay, when this financial crisis will be over, then I'll have some money, I'll give it to chanda. But right now, let me just keep it for myself. Moving on, Satan threatens you with poverty and enjoins you upon you what is foul, whereas Allah promises you forgiveness for Himself and bounty, and Allah is bountiful and all-knowing. So again, this fear of poverty that prevents us from spending the money. So Allah says, don't worry about that. I'm the one who is bountiful. I'm the one who's going to increase your wealth. nothing else. And Satan is the one who's telling you that, hide that income. Don't give the pledge that is accurate according to your income, and what you should be doing. Moving on. He grants wisdom to whom he pleases, and whoever is granted wisdom has indeed been granted abundant good, and none would be reminded except those endowed with understanding. And whatsoever you spend, or whatsoever vow you vow, Allah surely knows it. It is, and for the wrongdoers there shall be no helpers, right? So whatever you spend, Allah knows. Allah knows what He gave you. Allah knows what you spent. There's nothing hidden from Him. I'm going to move on to the last verse. Right. So I'm gonna cut you off. Cut this off here. But basically, Allah is, in the last verse it says, "And whatever of your wealth you spend, it shall be paid back to you in full, and you shall not be wrong." So this is the guarantee from Allah. This is not me saying. This is not some other person saying. Allah has said that whatever of wealth you spend, it shall be paid back to you in full. That's the biggest guarantee you can have. If you put your trust in Allah, you trust His word, then that's what you should follow. I'm gonna quote from another from the Promised Messiah. This quote. Let me try to make it a little bigger. Okay. All right. And I wrote down a rough translation of it. This was in Urdu. So let me put up this in Urdu, and then I'll try to read, just to save time. I'll try to read the English that I have on the side. Here. Okay. So, Promised Messiah says, and this is from a khutbah of Azur that I recommend. That this is from 2008, just before the financial crisis. So I was reading it, and I really recommend that you go ahead and read it. Has a lot of wisdom, especially before the last financial crisis. And Zuru was talking about the U.S. and how U.S. is very proud of its economy and all that. And this is from June, so within 2-3 months in September, October, that financial crisis hit. So I do recommend this, June 6th of 2008. So Promised Messiah says that when people cross the limits and put all their trust on the physical means and put all his efforts towards that, towards the physical means, then that is shirk, associating partners with Allah. That throws him away from the real purpose. For example, if someone says that I did not have those means, I would have died from hunger. Or if I did not have that property, I would have felt some pain, or I would have suffered. Or if I did not have friend, it would have been painful. Allah does not like this, and that you should put all your trust in property or those means or friends, or move away from those, from Allah completely. This is dangerous shirk, which is completely against the teachings of the Holy Quran. Allah says in the Holy Quran, "And heaven is your sustenance, and also that which you are promised." This is from chapter 51, verse 23. "And he who puts his trust in Allah, he is sufficient for him." Surah Al-Talaq, verse number 4. And he says, "And he who fears Allah, he will make for him a way out, and will provide for him from where he expects not." So again, really important you're not even expecting income from a source, but Allah will provide you income or sustenance from a source that you're not even expecting. This is also from Surah Al-Talaq, verse number 3 and 4. And finally, from Surah Al-Araf, verse 197, "And he protects the righteous." And Prophet further says, "The Holy Quran is full of such verses where Allah is the guardian and provider of the one who are righteous." So when someone relies on these means, then he denies the attributes of Allah, and he gives a part of the attributes of Allah to these physical means. Since he leans towards these measures, so he takes a step towards shirk, that is associating partners with Allah. Those who are inclined towards the government officials and get some reward or title from them, then he develops some kind of respect for them, and in his heart, just like the respect of God, then he falls in love. Actually, let me just for those who are reading will do. Uh, this does he falls in love with those government officials or some other means, um, and this leads to degradation of Tawheed. Tawheed meaning the unity of Allah, and he moves away from his real goal. Thus, the prophets have advised that one should not confuse the physical means and the Tawheed or unity of Allah, and keep each one of this should be kept in its own place. All the means should lead you to Tawheed. So the physical means they have its own place, but then the unity of Allah they have its own place, and one should lead you to other, not replace the other. Um, they want to teach us that all honors, all comforts, uh, and the provider of all our needs is God. Therefore, if anything else is made to be equal to Him, then it is obvious one of these will overcome the other. Therefore, the unity of Allah should be the one which should come on top. One should not acquire the means, but one should acquire the means, but means should not be made God. Due to this unity, one develops love of Allah, and when one realizes that the profit and loss is His hands, meaning Allah's hands, then He's the one who really loves you. Every minute, every minute thing belongs to Him. Then there's nothing else that can come in between Him and Allah. When someone attains this pious state, then he is the one who is called a Unitarian, or the one who is a Mohid, or one who believes in Tawheed. Thus, one part of Tawheed is that one should not worship stones or other humans and does not make anything else equal to God. Instead, he should hate it and should show impatience with other conditions with other things, and one should not rely on physical means. So that was basically my saying that chanda is very important, whether it be Jamaat chanda, chanda aam, chanda jalsa salana, chanda wasiyat that you need to pay, and that deadline is coming up, or khudam chanda. Many of us have not really given our pledge so far for this current fiscal year. At least half of the khudam have not given their pledge. So if you're seeing on my screen and you're on your computer, what I recommend you to go is to chanda.mkusa.org. Go to this page. There's a button called Submit Budget. Click on that. And if you don't remember whether you submitted your budget or not submitted your budget, I recommend that you do submit it again. And if it's a duplicate budget, we'll just take the latest value that you submit for your budget, and just be honest according to your income, as I explained already. Don't need to go over it. It's a short form, just will take you 7-8 fields. Your member code, if you don't know, you can leave it blank. Name, majlis, email address. We're not asking for income, but if you enter some income, it will try to calculate your. So if I entered $500, it'll say, okay, 41,379 is your income. Is that correct? And then you verify, okay, this is the correct income. If you cannot afford according to your income, there's an option to request for remission, and so subs will get that request and he approves all the requests. There's no denial. But you honestly say, okay, I cannot pay, according to my income, $500, 41,379 is my income. I cannot pay $500. You request and you give a reason, and we will allow you to pay less, but your pledge should not be, and then you specify what you can pay down here, right? But you should not lie, as already explained in all the verses that I read. You should not lie based on your income, that I earn less. Don't put in here $500 if your income is $100,000, right? So just be honest, and if you can't pay according to your income, then explain why you can't pay, and then that request will be approved. So first of all, do submit your budget. Next thing, if you haven't paid this year's chanda, go ahead, pay my chanda. Now with the physical distancing and everything, we're not collecting cash, we're not collecting checks. Just pay online. One-time payment or recurring payment. I recommend you set up recurring payment. You can say myself. Really recommend bank account, best option, because that's very minimal fees, only 6 cents. So if you give your routing number and your checking account number that's on your check, select that, fill it out, submit it, and you can select a schedule, start date, end date, how frequent you want it, twice a week, twice a month, monthly, quarterly. Select that amount, submit it, take care of your chanda, and I'm gonna end here. Jazakallah. I think I went over time.
Jazakallah, Muhtaram Saab.